Madam President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, members of the House of Assembly, fellow St. Lucians, I am pleased to deliver this year's throne speech as the Governor General of St. Lucia. Our country has grown and is maturing into a nation where our citizens are beginning to believe in themselves and demonstrating that they can be as good as any other. Never before have I seen such deep sense of pride and joy among our people following the achievements of our Olympic gold medalist, Julian Alfred. This sense of St. Lucian pride augurs well for the future of our country and offers my government a strong platform upon which to build a nation of achievers. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, this sense of pride deserves constant validation and support. And so my government remains committed to growing the St. Lucian economy so that it can deliver its promise to improve the health care system, the security and safety of citizens, and the creation of jobs. In doing so, it will be laying before this House St. Lucia's largest budget, an outlay of recurrent and capital expenditure of $2.1 billion for the fiscal year 2025-2026. The 2025-2026 budget follows favorable periods of performance of the St. Lucian economy, with an average annual economic growth rate of over 3% for the last 3 years. A primary current account surplus and unemployment for the first time below 10%. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, with those favorable indicators, there are reasons for optimism in 2025, 2026, and beyond, though we need to be mindful of the possible negative impact of the imposition of international trade tariffs. These trade tariffs have already created an increasingly uncertain global economic environment, which we will have to navigate skillfully to mitigate the impact of higher inflation on our people. Citizens will be pleased to know that the healthcare system remains high on my government's agenda. I am pleased to announce that the St. Jude Hospital will be completed and commissioned before long. The completion and commissioning of St. Jude Hospital is the desire of every citizen. In fact, it has been a source of public angst and disappointment that after over 15 years since fire destroyed the hospital, that we have yet to complete its reconstruction. For the patients, doctors, nurses, and support staff of St. Jude Hospital, the time is nigh. St. Jude Hospital will be completed and commissioned. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, to enhance the services offered and bed capacity of the country's main health facility, OKU Hospital, my government will be undertaking the construction of the 5th wing of that hospital. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government will also be expanding the Universal Health Care Program, which is already providing free cervical, prostate, and kidney disease screening, among other services, to include the integration of the healthcare system to allow for greater efficiency and effectiveness in the delivery of health care. In addition, the program will extend its reach to ensure that every citizen in need of health care gets it. The expansion of the program will enable my government to deliver on its promises to provide quality health care that is affordable and accessible. The required additional work in this area has started with the engagement of consultants who have been in consultation for several months with stakeholders. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I come to the issue of citizen safety and crime, which has become a modern-day vexing problem for many countries. In our context, it has become unfairly a government and police issue. The incidence of crime is a manifestation of deeper social issues which need to be addressed. If we are to address this issue effectively, we need as a nation to begin having greater respect for the value of human life. This is why, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government, in addition to providing law enforcement with the necessary resources, has undertaken several interventions to assist vulnerable groups and individuals in our society, ensuring that they are able to look after themselves and to have a dignified existence. My government's commitment to ensuring citizen safety and crime reduction remains resolute. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government's establishment of the Swift Justice Project became operational last year. To date, over 100 criminal cases pending before the High Court have been heard. My government continues to deliver unmatched support for law enforcers by providing the requisite training, equipment, and working conditions to ensure that they remain motivated and dedicated in detecting and deterring crime. As it relates to facilities of law enforcers, the state-of-the-art Groseley Divisional Headquarters, currently under construction, will be completed in the last quarter of 2025. Along the role of law enforcers in the fight against crime is the need for a judicial system that is able to deliver justice to those who have been wronged. Our courts have been inadequate in numbers and quality infrastructure. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government, in response to the inadequacy of our court system, after the absence of remedial action for several years, has committed to the establishment of a Hall of Justice. In my address to this Parliament last year, mention was made about the early commencement of this construction. However, this was delayed because of concerns expressed by the Catholic Church about the proximity of the proposed structure to the church building and the likely negative impact on its structure integrity during construction of the Hall of Justice. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government has since addressed those concerns, and the construction of the Hall of Justice has now started. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, beyond the foregoing initiatives, my government intends to make changes to close several legal gaps to enable law enforcers and courts to be more effective in the administration of justice. I will indicate the relevant changes later in my address when I present my government's legislative agenda. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, growing the economy and facilitating private investment is my government's answer to creating jobs for those able and willing to work. Moreover, the increase in investor confidence has had similar effects in the creation of jobs. My government's success in the creation of jobs is reflected in the declining rate of unemployment, which I earlier referred to as being below 10%. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, no reference to job creation should be made without the inclusion of the role of the Youth Employment Agency, YEA. This agency has enhanced the economic participation of youth in the economy, resulting in lower youth unemployment. In response to the increase in youth's demand for services and support of YEA, my government will commit further resources to this agency. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my government also intends in its 2025-2026 budget to introduce initiatives aimed at increasing the level of disposable income of those in work. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, following from last year, alongside the increase in private sector investment, my government will continue to improve the infrastructure of the country. Several infrastructural projects have been earmarked for 2025-2026 fiscal year. Ongoing and proposed major infrastructural expansion will include roads and bridges, school plant and equipment, fifth finger of the OKAU Hospital, Universal Healthcare Program, the cruise port, Hunora International Airport, IT infrastructure, hotels and the recommencement of the Beaufort Administrative Complex. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, in recognition of the important role the Citizen by Investment Program, CIP, has been playing in the economic development of our country and the need to secure its sustainability, my government joined with 4 other countries, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, and Grenada, to establish an interim regulatory committee with a mandate to create a regulatory commission and enabling legislation to regulate, to set and to enforce common standards for the operation of CIP in its 5 jurisdictions. The establishment of the Regulatory Commission will provide greater transparency and accountability in the operation, the program, and help protect the integrity of the citizenship of member countries. My government remains committed to the CIP program and is prepared to work with the United Kingdom, European Union, and the United States of America authorities, as well as participating OECS CIP countries, to ensure international standards are being satisfied and best practices observed. The Interim Regulatory Commission, IRC, has completed its consultation process with key stakeholders in 5 jurisdictions. The next stage of the process is for the IRC to have the relevant draft legislation available for review and comment in May. In fact, in May this year, before its enactment in the respective jurisdictions in December 2025. The enactment of the relevant legislation for regulating CIP program in participating countries is expected to strengthen the reputation and quality of the program, in addition to preserving the integrity of the citizenship of member countries. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, if ever there was a time when we need to be working together for our common good, it is now. Our world is becoming an increasingly selfish and uncaring place. The promotion of international common good is fading inexorably. Rich countries are doing less for poorer countries, and in some cases, precluding them from advancing themselves. As a people, we therefore need to work collaboratively and more independently. We need to give more support for that which is local. Grow what we eat what we grow, and make the best use of the resources at our disposal. Our food security must go beyond rhetoric and begin to take center stage in the development of our country. We are at a transitional point in our development, which calls for change if we are to secure our survival as a nation. It is evident that the solution pride that is required to make that change in the face of unfriendly external environment is present. We need to make that shift now for ourselves and the future of our generations. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, as if our challenges as a small developing nation state are not enough, we have been faced with combating existential threat of climate change, a situation created by richer countries of the world for which small nation states like ours are affected disproportionately. My government, mindful of the realities of climate change, recently established a sovereign wealth fund to financially support St. Lucia's resilience to climate change effects and to reduce the country's vulnerabilities by undertaking climate adaptation and mitigation projects. Legislative agenda. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I come now to my government's legislative agenda for the fiscal year 2025-2026, and some of the main areas which will be addressed. 1, the enactment of legislation for the regulation of cannabis and industrial hemp. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, under this legislation, provision will be made for the appointment of a Cannabis Advisory Council to give advice, make recommendations, and collaborate with the Regulated Substances Authority, established under the Regulated Substances Authority Act 26 of 2023. Madam President, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, the enactment of fingerprinting law is long overdue. Legislation will be enacted to establish, among other things, a fingerprints bureau, which will be responsible for taking, preserving, comparing, and indexing fingerprints. This new law will go a long way in establishing improvements in crime detection. 3, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, plea bargaining is not a provision under our existing laws. During this fiscal year, provisions will be made to incorporate plea bargaining into our laws. Plea bargaining will become accessible for both summary and indictable offenses that are committed before or after the relevant legislation comes into effect. 4, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, while the Justice Protection Act number 7 of 2001 allows for the protection or assistance of some witnesses, there are no provisions for the protection of witnesses in criminal proceedings. This is a major gap in our laws which requires correction. The law of witness protection will be amended to allow witnesses in criminal proceedings to give evidence in the High Court, the District Court, or Court of Appeal in private, through video recordings outside of St. Lucia, or through an intermediary. 5, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, the regularization of unplanned development of government's own lands has not been as effective as it should have been under the PROUD program. My government intends to improve the efficiency and regularizing unplanned developments across the country by transitioning the work of PROUD into a body corporate. This change should allow for greater focus on accountability. It is intended that many occupiers of those lands will soon be able to gain a title to a piece of St. Lucia. 6, in recognition of the changing landscape of electricity power generation, my government will make changes to the existing Electricity Service Act, Supply Act, Cap 9.02, to limit the exclusive license to the use of fossil fuels only, which St. Lucia Electricity Services Limited currently enjoys for the generation, transmission, transformation, distribution, and supply of electricity to consumers. Under the proposed changes, the National Utilities Regulatory Commission will be responsible for issuing licenses to new players in the sector for the generation, distribution, and supply of electricity from renewable sources. 7, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, amendments to the Administration of Small Succession Act, Cap 4.12, needs to be updated to reflect current realities. The proposed change is to allow the Registrar of the High Court to be responsible for letters of administration where the value of succession does not exceed $25,000. Currently, the amount is $5,000. And 8, as a participatory and responsible member of the Organization of East Caribbean States, OECS, my government will adopt the model patent legislation prepared for the OECS members in collaboration with World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, to strengthen the legal and regulatory framework that is required to safeguard and monetize intellectual property rights in OECS member states. This model patent legislation will be modified to reflect our legislative style, language, and existing legal framework. This legislation will be administered by the Registry of Companies and Intellectual Property, which will be responsible for registering patents. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, last year, reference was made to the establishment of the Constitutional Review Committee, chaired by the Speaker of the House of Assembly, to review the recommendations of the late Justice Susie Dauvergne Constitutional Reform Report. The committee is still in the process of reviewing the recommendations of the report and is expected to present its final report this year. Conclusion. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, in concluding my address, I wish to draw attention to my government's concern about the deeply disturbing and growing phenomenon in our country, which needs to be corrected if we are to build a society rooted in respect for our citizens, integrity, and trust. Influencers, in whatever space they may operate, need to be truthful because people depend on them in varying degrees for guidance and formulation of ideas, opinions, and actions. It is therefore incumbent upon them, especially when they are in positions of significant influence, that they be truthful in addressing those whom they seek to influence. Influencers who are willing to make public utterances which are contrary to objective and verifiable evidence are doing a disservice to those whom they wish to influence. And in so doing, the process of contributing to the destruction of the moral fabric of our country. We cannot build a nation based on untruths. It is only a matter of time before light before the light of hope and progress goes off on us. People need to be told the truth if they are to make informed decisions about their lives and that of their families. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, respect for people can only start when we begin to start treating each other as ends in themselves and not a means to an end. And we can only do so by being truthful, especially to those whom we claim we wish to serve. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, away from the somber note, let me thank the Prime Minister, the government and people of St. Lucia for the opportunity to serve as their Governor General. It has been an honor and a privilege. I wish the government and people well in their joint effort in building this hospitable and beautiful country of ours. It is my wish that we maintain our uniqueness as a people and as a country so that the rest of the world may have a unique experience of God's expression of this creation, St. Lucia. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, having extended my wishes to the government and people of St. Lucia, as well as my gratitude for the privilege to serve as Governor General of St. Lucia, I now declare this 5th session of the 12th Parliament officially open.